I stood in my son Michael's doorway, holding the apple pie I'd baked for our first meeting with his fiancée. Madison took one look at me and burst out laughing. "At least you don't need a Halloween mask, you're scary enough as it is," she sneered, pointing at the burn scars covering half my face. Michael shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. I forced a smile, remembering the fire that had taken everything from me 30 years ago. She had no idea who she'd just insulted. 3 weeks passed since that first meeting, and I found myself steering my 1994 Ford pickup through the manicured entrance of Westfield Country Club. The parking attendant's eyes lingered on my truck with barely concealed disdain as Bentleys and Mercedes glided past. I'd worn my best suit, the navy one I'd bought at Sears 5 years ago, pressed and clean despite its age. The invitation had come through Michael, not Madison. "Dad, please come," he'd said on the phone. "I know the first meeting didn't go well, but Madison wants to make things right." His voice had carried that hopeful tone I could never resist, the same one he'd used as a boy asking if I'd play catch after double shifts at the factory. I walked through the club's grand entrance, my worn dress shoes clicking against marble that probably cost more per square foot than I supposedly made in a month. The ballroom opened before me like something from a movie, crystal chandeliers casting diamonds of light across guests who looked like they'd stepped from fashion magazines. Madison spotted me immediately. She glided over in a shimmering gold dress, her smile sharp as winter ice. "Oh, Brent, you actually came." Her voice carried across the room, drawing attention. "Everyone, this is Michael's father. Isn't he authentic?" The way she said authentic made it sound like a disease. She looped her arm through mine before I could react, her manicured nails digging slightly into my sleeve. "Come, let me introduce you to everyone. They're dying to meet Michael's family." What followed was a parade of humiliation dressed in politeness. Madison introduced me to group after group, always with that same cutting edge. "This is Brent. He works at a hardware store. Can you imagine, so quaint?" Or, "Michael's father lives in such a charming little apartment on the east side. You know where they're trying to gentrify." I smiled through it all, nodded when appropriate, shook hands with people who barely masked their discomfort at my scarred face. Years of practice had taught me to read the quick glances away, the involuntary flinches, the relief when they could politely escape. Then Madison orchestrated her masterpiece. She clinked her champagne glass, gathering the room's attention. "Everyone, I have the most wonderful idea." Her voice sparkled with false charity. "As you all know, Michael and I believe in giving back. Tonight I'd like to start a special fund." My stomach tightened. I'd learned to sense cruelty coming the way animals sense storms. "We're going to auction off donations for a very special cause." She continued, gesturing toward me. "Reconstructive surgery for those who can't afford it, and our first beneficiary is right here in this room." The silence that followed was deafening. 200 pairs of eyes turned to me, some pitying, others amused, most simply uncomfortable. I stood there feeling decades younger, suddenly transported back to those first months after the fire, when strangers' stares had felt like physical wounds. "Now who'll start the bidding?" Madison chirped. "Surely we can help Brent get the treatment he deserves. Imagine how much better he'll feel when he can look in the mirror without—" She trailed off artfully, letting everyone fill in the blank. My hand found my phone in my pocket, pressing record by touch alone. Years of living carefully had taught me to document everything. "That's very thoughtful, Madison," I said, my voice carrying the calm I'd perfected through 30 years of smaller cruelties. "But I'm comfortable with who I am." "Oh, but you don't have to be." She pressed on champagne, making her bolder. "Everyone deserves to feel normal, don't they?" A woman in pearls started to bid. Then another. The numbers climbed as Madison's smile grew wider. I stood there, a living auction item, maintaining my dignity through will alone. That's when the ballroom doors opened. Harold and Eleanor Whitmore entered like royalty, returning to court. Madison's parents were everything their daughter pretended to be: elegant without effort, commanding without cruelty. Harold's silver hair caught the light as he scanned the room. Eleanor, in understated navy, moved with the grace of old money. Their eyes found me simultaneously. Eleanor's champagne flute slipped from her fingers, crystal shattering against marble in a sound that cut through the auction chatter. Harold stopped mid-stride, his face draining of color like someone had opened a valve. "My God," Eleanor whispered, but in the sudden silence it carried. "Harold, is it really?" They moved toward me with the urgency of people who'd seen a ghost. But Madison intercepted them, misreading their shock as embarrassment. Mother-daddy perfect timing. She kissed air beside their cheeks. "We're just raising money for poor Brent's surgery. Isn't it wonderful?" Eleanor's eyes never left my face. "Brent," her voice cracked. "Brent Matthews. You know him." Madison laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Oh, this is rich. Don't tell me he did yard work for you or something." Harold pushed past his daughter, his hand extending toward me, trembling slightly. "Brent, we thought, after the fire you disappeared." Madison yanked her father's arm. "Daddy, you're making a scene. He's nobody important, just Michael's unfortunate father." The word unfortunate hung in the air like a blade. Eleanor looked between her daughter and me, tears threatening her perfect makeup. "Madison, you don't understand. This man is leaving," Madison interrupted. "The auction's over. We've raised enough for his little procedure." She turned to me, her smile poisonous. "You should go now, Brent. This isn't really your kind of crowd, is it?" I met Harold's eyes, saw the recognition there, the memory of who I used to be. Eleanor pressed a hand to her mouth, tears now flowing freely. But I simply nodded, turned, and walked towards the door. Behind me, I heard Madison hissing at her parents. "What is wrong with you two? You're embarrassing me in front of everyone." I paused at the ballroom entrance, looking back once. Harold and Eleanor stood frozen, watching me leave their faces, portraits of regret and recognition. Madison gestured wildly between them, oblivious to the magnitude of what she'd just done. The valet brought my truck around his smirk, poorly hidden. I climbed in, started the engine, and drove away from Westfield Country Club, with my phone full of recorded cruelty and my mind already working on what came next. Madison Whitmore thought she'd humiliated a nobody. She had no idea she'd just declared war on someone who'd spent 30 years learning patience was the deadliest weapon of all. My apartment welcomed me with its familiar simplicity. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, furniture from estate sales, and careful Craigslist finds. The neighbors knew me as the quiet man in 4B, who helped carry groceries and fixed leaky faucets without being asked. None of them suspected the truth hiding behind my modest life. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff I kept for moments when memories demanded attention, then walked to my bedroom closet. Behind winter coats I rarely needed in California hung a painting I'd bought at a flea market. Ugly thing, all muddy browns and confused brush strokes. The seller had practically begged me to take it. The painting swung aside on hidden hinges, revealing a wall safe that had cost more than my truck. Inside lay the archaeology of a different livestock: certificates, bank statements, legal documents, and photographs, yellowed by time, but sharp with memory. I pulled out a photo first. Sarah smiled back at me, frozen forever at 32, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. We'd taken it 2 weeks before the fire. Before everything changed. Before Madison's parents knew my name, and I knew what loss really meant. But I wasn't here to wallow. I had work to do. The financial documents told a story few people knew. 30 years ago, I'd been Brent Matthews, tech entrepreneur, founder of Nexus Systems. We'd developed supply chain software before most people knew what supply chains were. By 28, I was worth $12 million. By 38, I'd turned that into $40 million through careful investment. Then came the warehouse fire. Faulty wiring, the investigators said. I'd gone back for the night janitor gotten him out, went back again when I heard someone screaming. The screaming was electrical wires melting, not a person, but by the time I realized that the ceiling had collapsed. I woke up 3 months later to find half my face gone and Sarah dead from complications during an emergency C-section. Michael had survived 3 months premature fighting for life in the NICU while I learned to walk again. The lawsuit settlements and insurance payouts added another $20 million to my accounts. Blood money, I'd thought then. Still did. But I'd invested it carefully, quietly, letting compound interest do its patient work, while I raised Michael in deliberate simplicity. A folder marked Whitmore Industries caught my attention. I smiled, remembering Harold's desperation 30 years ago. His company had been bleeding money weeks from bankruptcy. He'd pitched me in a hotel bar, not knowing who I was, just seeing a scarred man who listened without judgment. I'd saved Whitmore Industries with a silent investment, taking 40% ownership through a shell company, but never claiming a board seat. Let Harold think an anonymous benefactor had rescued him. The quarterly statements showed my investment had grown to roughly $15 million in value. I'd kept tabs on the Whitmores over the years, watching from a distance as they rebuilt their empire. They'd had a daughter 5 years after I'd disappeared from public life. Madison. I'd even sent an anonymous gift when she was born, a trust fund for her education. Ironic, considering how she'd turned out. My phone buzzed. Thompson Investigative Services. I'd hired them 3 weeks ago, right after that first meeting with Madison. Brent, it's Charlie Thompson. You need to see what we found. 20 minutes later, Charlie sat across from me at my kitchen table, spreading out surveillance photos and financial records. Charlie was former FBI, built like a refrigerator, with eyes that missed nothing. I'd kept him on retainer for years, handling delicate matters. Your boy's fiancée is a piece of work, Charlie said, sliding a photo across the table. Madison at a hotel in Pasadena, kissing a man who definitely wasn't Michael. Derek Chen, her ex-boyfriend. They've met 6 times in the last month. I studied the photos, feeling anger simmer, but keeping it leashed. Patience, always patience. There's more. Charlie pulled out bank statements. She's been draining your son's accounts. Slow bleeds couple thousand here and there. Wedding expenses, she tells him. But look where the money actually goes. Designer clothes, jewelry, cash withdrawals that matched the dates she met Derek. My son, my honest, hard-working son, who'd never taken a penny he hadn't earned, was being bled dry by a parasite in an evening gown. How much debt is she carrying? Charlie whistled low. North of $300,000. Credit cards, personal loans, some sketchy peer-to-peer lending. She's been juggling it for years, but the walls are closing in. My guess, she needs Michael's credit to keep the game going. Any fraud? Getting there. She's applied for 3 credit cards in Michael's name. He probably signed something he didn't read carefully. She's smart about it, keeping just under the radar. I leaned back, processing. Madison wasn't just cruel. She was dangerous. A financial predator who'd targeted my son for his stability and clean credit. The engagement party had shown me her character. These documents showed me her methods. Keep digging, I told Charlie. I want everything. Every transaction, every meeting with the ex, every debt she's hiding. After Charlie left, I made another call. Richard Steinberg and Associates had handled my legal affairs for 3 decades. David Richards answered on the second ring, despite the late hour. Brent, what's the emergency? I need to set up a trust fund. $10 million. Very specific conditions. David knew better than to express surprise at the amount. We'd worked together too long. What kind of conditions? The beneficiary is Michael Matthews, my son. The money becomes available to him only if he's not married to Madison Whitmore. If he marries her, the trust locks for 5 years, then reverts to charity. That's unusual. Legal, but unusual. Can you have it ready by tomorrow? Consider it done. I hung up and returned to my safe, pulling out one last item. A medal in a velvet box. Purple Heart. I'd thrown it in a drawer after the army pinned it on me back when I thought surviving was a punishment, not a gift. Now I set it on the table, remembering the warehouse fire wasn't the first time I'd run into flames for strangers. Madison thought she was preying on a poor, scarred nobody. She thought Michael came from nothing and had nobody to protect him. Tomorrow she'd start learning how wrong she was. I picked up my phone again, scrolling to a contact I hadn't used in years. Margaret Ashford owned the most exclusive bridal boutique in Southern California. She also owed me a favor from when I'd quietly covered her lease during COVID. Margaret, it's Brent Matthews. I have a business proposition for you. By the time I finished my calls and arrangements, dawn was breaking. I stood at my window watching the city wake up, planning my next moves. Madison had drawn first blood with her cruelty. She'd stolen from my son. She'd betrayed his trust. But I'd spent 30 years learning that revenge wasn't a dish best served cold. It was best served precisely with documentation and in full view of everyone who mattered. The game was just beginning. Saturday morning arrived with typical Southern California perfection, 72 degrees and cloudless. I parked my truck 3 blocks from Ashford Bridal, not wanting to announce my presence too early. The purchase had gone through at midnight. Margaret Ashford more than happy to accept my offer of 3 times market value for her boutique. I'd given her only one instruction business as usual until I said otherwise. Through the boutique's window, I watched Madison arrive with her entourage. 6 bridesmaids, all variations on the same theme, blonde, entitled, and armed with champagne flutes before noon. They swept into the store like conquering armies' voices carrying through the glass. I waited 15 minutes, then entered through the side door Margaret had left unlocked. Madison stood on a raised platform surrounded by mirrors wrapped in what looked like $30,000 of French lace and delusion. The dress was admittedly stunning, all intricate beadwork and flowing silk, the kind of thing that would photograph beautifully while maxing out credit cards. "It needs to be tighter here," Madison commanded, gesturing at her waist. "I want everyone to gasp when they see me." One of her bridesmaids, a redhead with vocal fry, agreed loudly. "Totally. You need to look absolutely perfect when you become Mrs. Matthews." That's when I stepped into view. "Actually," I said conversationally, "she might want to reconsider the name change." Madison's reflection caught me first. Her face went from entitled bride to cornered animal in 2 seconds flat. She spun, nearly toppling off the platform, her voice hitting a pitch that probably disturbed dogs 3 blocks away. "What are you doing here? This is a private appointment." I maintained my calm, pulling out my phone as if checking the time. In reality, I was recording again. "Public establishment, Madison. Just thought I'd see what my son is supposedly paying $30,000 for." Get out," she gestured wildly at the staff. "Someone call security, this man is harassing me." Margaret Ashford emerged from the back. Her silver hair perfectly coiffed her expression, professionally neutral. "Is there a problem, Miss Whitmore?" "This person is stalking me. He has no right to be here." I smiled pleasantly. "Actually, I have every right. Funny thing about ownership." Madison was too angry to process the hint. She stomped one silk-covered foot, looking like a toddler in couture. "I am trying to select my wedding dress in peace, the one day that's supposed to be about me, and you have to ruin it with your—" She gestured at my face, but couldn't finish the sentence. Even she had limits, apparently. "Your what?" I prompted gently. "Go ahead, Madison. Your bridesmaids haven't heard your Halloween mask joke yet." The redhead gasped. "Madison, you didn't—" "Of course not," Madison snapped. "He's lying. He's probably senile. Someone please remove him before I call the police." "No need for that," Margaret said smoothly. She walked to the register, picked up the payment terminal. "Let's just complete your transaction and everyone can go their separate ways. That will be $32,000 with alterations." Madison thrust out her hand imperiously. "The credit card, Brittany." A blonde bridesmaid fumbled in her purse, producing a black American Express. Madison snatched it, swiping with the confidence of someone who'd never met a credit limit she couldn't exceed. The machine beeped, declined. "Run it again," Madison ordered. "The system's probably glitching." Margaret ran it again. Same result. "Try this one." Madison produced another card, then another, then 3 more. All declined with the same merciless beep. The boutique fell silent except for the sound of Madison's hyperventilating. Her bridesmaids exchanged glances, champagne suddenly forgotten. "This is impossible," Madison hissed. "My cards are fine. I just used them yesterday." That was true. She'd used them at Nordstrom Tiffany, and a very expensive lunch. All charges I'd had reversed as fraudulent the moment my ownership of her creditor's debt went through. Amazing what you could do with $40 million in liquid assets and good lawyers. "Perhaps," Margaret suggested delicately, "you'd like to call your bank." Madison was already dialing her face, flushing deeper with each failed attempt. I stepped closer to the mirrors, admiring the craftsmanship of the dress she couldn't afford. "Beautiful work," I told Margaret. "Really exceptional. Shame it'll have to go back on the rack." "Don't you dare!" Madison shrieked. "This is my dress. I've been planning this for months." "Planning and affording are different things," I observed. "Kind of like pretending to love someone and actually loving them." The redhead bridesmaid inhaled sharply. "Madison, what's he talking about?" "Nothing." He's crazy. But sweat was beading on Madison's forehead now, her perfect makeup starting to run. Margaret cleared her throat. "I'm afraid I'll need you to remove the dress now, Miss Whitmore. Store policy requires payment before alterations." "This is sabotage," Madison pointed at me with a shaking finger. "He did something. This psycho-scarred freak did something to my accounts." I pulled out my wallet, extracted a business card I'd had printed that morning. Simple white stock, expensive in its simplicity. It read, "Nexus Holdings, LLC, Brent Matthews Managing Partner." I handed it to Margaret with a slight smile. "Actually, Ms. Ashford, about that ownership I mentioned." Margaret's performance was Oscar-worthy. She studied the card, then nodded slowly. "Ah, yes. The closing was last night, wasn't it? Congratulations on your purchase, Mr. Matthews." The bridesmaids' collective gasp could have sucked all the oxygen from the room. Madison stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a beached fish. "You bought what?" "The boutique," I said simply. "As of midnight, which means technically you're trespassing in my establishment. But I'm not unreasonable. You can stay long enough to change back into your street clothes." Madison's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the platform, $30,000 of silk pooling around her like fallen dreams. "This isn't happening. This can't be happening." One bridesmaid, braver than the rest, stepped forward. "Mr. Matthews, what's really going on here?" I looked at her, then at the others. Young women who'd probably never questioned Madison's stories, never wondered where the money came from, never asked why Michael always looked so tired when bills came due. "Ask Madison about Derek," I suggested. "Ask her why she meets him every Tuesday at the Pasadena Marriott. Ask her whose credit cards she's really been using." Madison's head snapped up. "You're having me followed." "I'm protecting my son. There's a difference." The redhead backed away from Madison like she was contagious. "Derek, your ex. Derek Madison, you said you hadn't talked to him in years." "It's not what it sounds like." Madison scrambled to her feet, the dress tangling around her legs. "We're just friends. Michael knows about it." "Does he?" I pulled out my phone, showed them a photo Charlie had taken. Madison and Derek very clearly not being just friends. Funny kind of friendship. The bridesmaids erupted in overlapping accusations and denials. Madison tried to defend herself, but her story kept changing. First, Derek was helping her plan a surprise. Then he was giving her business advice. Then he was just someone who happened to be at the same hotel. Margaret stepped in with professional grace. "Ladies, I'm going to have to ask you all to leave. We have another appointment coming in." Madison ripped at the dress, trying to get it off without help, her sobs echoing off the mirrors. This isn't over, I'll sue you. I'll destroy you. Michael will never forgive you for humiliating me like this. I waited until she was back in her street clothes, mascara streaming down her face, her entourage already fleeing to their luxury cars. Then I stepped close, speaking quietly enough that only she could hear. You humiliated yourself the day you decided my son was a wallet instead of a person. But don't worry, Madison. This is just the beginning. By the time I'm done, everyone will know exactly who you really are. She ran from the boutique, leaving behind the dress she'd never afford, and the dreams she'd built on my son's credit. I stood in the sudden quiet, surrounded by white silk and broken plans. Margaret approached her professional mask, slipping to reveal genuine concern. Brent, are you sure about all this? That young woman seems unstable. I thought about Michael, about the pain coming his way when he learned the truth. But better pain from truth than a lifetime of lies. Sometimes, I told her, you have to destroy something completely before you can rebuild it right. Through the window, I watched Madison's car peel out of the parking lot, her bridesmaids' vehicles following like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Phase 1 was complete. The wedding dress she'd planned to wear while stealing my son's future lay crumpled on the dressing room floor. But I was far from finished. I had lawyers to meet, evidence to review, and a son to save. Even if he hated me for it at first. 10 days before the wedding, rain hammered Los Angeles with unusual fury. I sat in my apartment reviewing Charlie Thompson's latest surveillance reports when the doorbell rang at 9:40 p.m. Nobody visited me this late. Nobody visited me much at all, which was how I preferred it. Through the peephole, I saw Harold and Eleanor Whitmore soaked, despite their designer raincoats looking like refugees from their own perfect lives. I opened the door without surprise. I'd been expecting them since Madison's boutique meltdown. Eleanor's makeup was running, and not from the rain. Harold's usual CEO posture had collapsed into something desperate. Please, Eleanor said before I could speak. We need to talk to you. I stepped aside, letting them enter my modest living room. They stood dripping on my second-hand rug, taking in the space with eyes that had probably never seen anything below 6 figures. But I caught something else in their expressions. Recognition. Memory. Sit, I said, gesturing to my worn sofa. I'll get towels. When I returned, Harold was staring at a photo on my bookshelf. Michael at his college graduation, my arm around him, both of us grinning despite my scars. Eleanor was crying openly now, her shoulders shaking. You kept it simple, Harold said softly. After everything you chose this. I handed them towels settled into my recliner. I chose what mattered. My son didn't need millions. He needed a father. We looked for you, Eleanor burst out. After the fire, after Sarah, God, Brent, we searched everywhere. The hospital said you'd checked out against medical advice. Your company was dissolved. You just vanished. I didn't want to be found. Harold aged 10 years in front of me. When you saved my company, that anonymous investment, I always wondered. Some part of me hoped, but I never imagined. You'd find me as the father of your daughter's victim. Eleanor flinched. She wasn't always like this. Madison, she was such a sweet child. Generous kind? She trailed off, probably remembering when the change started. People show you who they are, I said. Your daughter showed me at that first meeting. She's been showing Michael for months. He just loves her too much to see it. Harold leaned forward, hands clasped like he was praying. She's sick, Brent. Not mentally, but morally. We failed somewhere. The money, the privilege, we thought we were giving her everything, but we created a monster. The word hung heavy between us. Parents admitting their child was a monster. I'd seen a lot in 68 years, but this particular agony was unique. She's been blackmailing us, Eleanor whispered. Our own daughter. I set down my bourbon, giving them my full attention. This was new. Harold pulled out his phone, showed me messages. She hired someone to create fake documents, tax evasion schemes with our signatures. completely fabricated but sophisticated enough to trigger an IRS investigation if released. She threatened to destroy everything we'd rebuilt unless we bankrolled her lifestyle. When did this start? 6 months ago, right after she got engaged to Michael. Eleanor's voice turned bitter. She said she needed it for the wedding, but the demands kept growing. Last month she wanted $200,000 for honeymoon expenses. I studied the fake documents on Harold's phone. Good forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless. My forensic accountants would tear them apart in minutes. Why didn't you go to the police? Harold laughed, no humor in it. Report our own daughter. The scandal alone would destroy Whitmore Industries. She knew that. Said if we loved our company more than her happiness, we deserved what we got. Classic Madison. Emotional manipulation wrapped in financial extortion. She'd learned to weaponize love against the people who felt it. But that's not why we're here, Eleanor said. She reached into her purse, pulled out an envelope. We found these in her room. We weren't snooping, we were looking for the tax documents to destroy them, but… Photos spilled onto my coffee table. Madison and Derek, but not just romantic meetings. Pictures of them with a man I recognized from Charlie's research. Vincent Morelli, a known associate of people who made problems disappear. Permanently. My blood chilled. She hired Morelli. We don't know for sure, Harold said quickly. But there are payments. $50,000 transferred to offshore accounts. The timing corresponds with my intervention in her life, I finished. Eleanor grabbed my hand, her desperation breaking through social barriers. We're scared, Brent. Not of her, but for her. She's spiraling into something darker than greed. The Madison we raised wouldn't, but the woman she's become might hurt someone to protect her secrets, I said. They both nodded, tears flowing freely now. Here sat two people who'd built an empire, commanded boardrooms, shaped industries, reduced to terrified parents by the child they'd created. I made a decision. Walking to my safe, I retrieved documents I'd had prepared for a different purpose. Proof that their tax documents were forgeries. Analysis from 3 separate forensic accountants. A legal brief outlining Madison's fraud, complete with remedies. Your tax records are clean, I told them, handing over the folder. My people verified everything. Madison's forgeries are good theater, nothing more. This documentation proves it. Harold's hands shook as he read. You did this for us. I did it for Michael, but you benefit too. Eleanor was studying other papers in the folder. Her face went white. She's been stealing from Michael credit fraud. Dear God, how much? Enough. But that's not your immediate problem. I pulled out Charlie's latest report. Your daughter isn't just meeting Derek for romance. They're planning something for the wedding. My investigator intercepted partial communications. Something about making sure the old man doesn't interfere and handling the problem permanently. Harold stood abruptly, pacing. We have to stop the wedding. No, I said. We have to let her think she's winning. Right now she's desperate but not cornered. Corner her and people get hurt. Then what do we do? Eleanor asked. I outlined my plan. The trust fund that would protect Michael's assets. The evidence already gathered. The careful choreography needed to expose Madison safely publicly in a way that would destroy her credibility without pushing her to violence. You'll need to play along, I told them. Pretend you know nothing. Act normal at the wedding. Can you do that? Harold and Eleanor exchanged glances, 35 years of marriage, allowing silent communication. They nodded together. There's one more thing, Eleanor said quietly. She pulled out a small box, placed it on my table. I've carried this for 30 years, hoping someday… I opened it. Inside lay a silver compass engraved with coordinates. My wedding gift to Sarah, which she'd worn as a necklace. I'd wondered what happened to it after the fire. She was wearing it when they brought her in, Eleanor whispered. The hospital gave it to us by mistake. We kept it hoping to return it when we found you. I held the compass, feeling its familiar weight. Sarah used to joke that I gave her direction. The coordinates led to the spot where I'd proposed a clifftop overlooking the Pacific. She'd want you to be happy, Harold said gently. Sarah wouldn't want you living like a ghost. I'm not a ghost, I replied. I'm a father, and right now my son needs me to be something else. What's that? Eleanor asked. Patient, thorough, and absolutely ruthless when it comes to protecting him. They left near midnight, armed with documents that freed them from their daughter's blackmail and burdened with knowledge of how far she'd fallen. At the door, Eleanor hugged me, whispering apologies for daughters and decades. After they gone, I sat with Sarah's compass plotting my next moves. Madison had shown her hand by involving Morelli. She wasn't just a financial predator anymore. She was potentially dangerous. But I'd survived actual war. I'd walked through fire, literally. I'd raised a son alone while rebuilding from nothing. Madison Whitmore, for all her schemes and threats, was about to learn what happened when you threatened someone who had nothing left to lose, except the one person he'd die to protect. 5 days until the wedding. Time enough to finish what she'd started. I picked up my phone, dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Sometimes old military connections came in handy. Rodriguez. It's Matthews. I need a favor. The kind that involves keeping someone safe without them knowing they're being protected. The game was escalating. Madison had introduced the possibility of violence. Time to make sure she was the only one who got hurt if she tried to follow through. Michael's bachelor party was supposed to be at a sports bar downtown, just him and 5 close friends. Madison had vetoed his original plan for a camping trip. Too dirty, she'd said. Too low class. So instead, my outdoorsman son was getting bottle service at a place that charged $40 for wings. I hadn't been invited. Michael had stammered through an explanation on the phone. Madison thought it would be awkward having me there with his younger friends. I'd told him I understood, which was true. I understood Madison was systematically isolating him from anyone who might protect him. Which is why I was walking into Dominion Steakhouse at 8:30 p.m. Harold Whitmore at my side. You sure about this? Harold adjusted his tie nervously. We made an odd pair, him in his $1,000 suit, me in my department store best. Your future son-in-law's bachelor party. Of course you should be there, I said, steering him through the entrance. Madison will understand. We both knew she wouldn't, but Harold had developed a taste for defying his daughter since I'd freed him from her blackmail. The private dining room pulsed with music and laughter. Michael's friends were good kids, an accountant, 2 teachers, a nurse, and a software developer. The kind of people Madison barely tolerated because they couldn't advance her social status. Then I spotted the 6th person and nearly turned around. Derek Chen sat at the bar designer clothes and predatory smile perfectly in place. Madison's ex, the man she was cheating with, drinking scotch at my son's bachelor party. Who invited him? Harold whispered. We both knew the answer. Michael spotted us from across the room. His face went through several emotions: surprise, embarrassment, then something that looked like relief. He'd been nursing the same beer for who knows how long, looking miserable at his own party. Dad. He stood up, swaying slightly. Mr. Whitmore, what are you doing here? Crashing, I said simply. Hope you don't mind. His friend James, the accountant, grinned. Thank God. We need some adults here. Derek's been trying to get Michael to do shots for an hour. Derek turned at his name, his smile faltering when he saw me. Recognition flared in his eyes. He knew who I was, what I represented. The threat to his meal ticket. The infamous, scarred father Derek said just loud enough to carry. Madison's told me so much about you. Funny, I replied. She claims you two haven't spoken in years. The room went quiet. Michael's friends exchanged glances. Harold gripped his drink tighter. Derek recovered quickly, laughing. She meant socially. We still run in the same circles. Hard to avoid each other completely. Especially on Tuesdays at the Pasadena Marriott. I added conversationally. Must be where your circles overlap. Michael set down his beer hard enough to splash. What? Nothing, Derek said quickly. Your father's confused. Maybe the champagne at all those charity auctions has gone to his head. Wrong move. The reference to Madison's humiliation of me made Michael's face darken. My son might be too trusting, but he wasn't stupid. Why are you here, Derek? Michael asked slowly. I didn't invite you. Madison thought you needed someone to make sure you had fun. Derek signaled the bartender. Speaking of which, let's get some real drinks flowing. This is supposed to be a celebration. Harold stepped forward. Actually, I'd love to hear more about your business, Derek. Madison mentioned you're in imports. It was a trap. Harold knew everything about Derek's business, which consisted mainly of spending family money and seducing engaged women. But Derek, already 3 drinks in, took the bait. Oh, you know, a little of this, little of that. Derek waved expansively. Actually, I've been helping Madison with some investments. She's got a real head for money. Does she? I pulled out my phone, started recording. What kind of investments? Well, Derek leaned in conspiratorially, alcohol loosening his tongue. Between you and me, your boy here isn't exactly Warren Buffett. Madison needs someone who understands wealth. The wedding's costing a fortune, and afterward... He trailed off, realizing he'd said too much. But Harold pressed on, playing the interested father-in-law perfectly. Afterward, you mean the honeymoon? Derek laughed, ugly and knowing. Sure, let's call it that. Look, Madison's a smart girl. She knows Michael's a nice guy, stable good credit. But a girl like her needs more than nice. After a year, maybe 2, she'll be set up properly. Then she can make better choices. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael's friends stared at Derek in horror. Harold had gone pale. And Michael, my son, stood perfectly still, processing what he'd just heard. The color drained from his face as understanding dawned. You're saying... Michael's voice came out, strangled. You're saying she's planning to divorce me? Derek tried to backtrack. No, I mean... Look, I'm drunk. I don't know what I'm saying. But the damage was done. James, the accountant, put pieces together first. Oh my God. She's been having you sign things, hasn't she? Mike, financial stuff. Said it was for the wedding planning. Michael nodded slowly. Joint credit applications. She said we needed them for the venue deposits. And you've been tired all the time, added Tom, one of the teachers, working extra shifts to cover wedding expenses. Well, she's been shopping with your money, said the nurse Lisa, disgust plain in her voice. Derek stood up, realizing he'd blown everything. I need to use the restroom. Sit down, I said quietly. Something in my voice made him obey. You're going to tell Michael everything, now. I don't have to tell anyone anything, Derek blustered. You can't make me. Harold smiled, cold as winter. Mr. Chen, wasn't your father hoping to do business with Whitmore Industries? Something about exclusive distribution rights. Derek went very still. Amazing how small the business world is, Harold continued. One word from me? Fine. Derek exploded. You want the truth? Madison's been playing your son since day one. She picked him because he's stable, boring, and easy to manipulate. The plan was simple: marry him, max out credit in both their names, claim abuse after a year, and walk away with alimony plus whatever she could squeeze out in the divorce. Each word hit Michael like a physical blow. He sank into his chair, head in his hands. Derek wasn't finished. She never loved him, called him her investment portfolio. Said the scarred father-in-law was a bonus because no judge would side with the ugly family in court. I moved before thinking, but Harold caught my arm. He's not worth it, Brent. Derek smirked. What's wrong? Tough guy can't handle the truth about your precious son's fiancée. She laughs about both of you. Says Michael's so desperate for love he'd marry anyone who'd have him, and you're too pathetic to stop it. Get out, Michael said quietly. Get out before I let my father do what he clearly wants to. Derek grabbed his coat, heading for the door. At the threshold, he turned back. For what it's worth, I tried to talk her out of the really nasty stuff. The thing with Morelli, But she said you were getting too nosy asking too many questions. Said you needed to be handled. Then he was gone, leaving devastation in his wake. Michael looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. You knew? This whole time you knew. I suspected, then I investigated, then I knew. Why didn't you tell me? I sat beside my son, put my arm around him. Would you have believed me? Or would Madison have convinced you I was trying to destroy your happiness out of jealousy? He broke then, sobbing like he hadn't since his mother died. His friends gathered around offering support. Harold spoke quietly to the restaurant manager, ensuring our privacy. What do I do? Michael asked when he could speak again. The wedding's in 5 days. Everything's paid for. Everyone's coming. We use that, I said. Let her think she's won. Let her walk into that church believing she's about to score the biggest payday of her life. Michael pulled back, studying my scarred face. You have a plan. I have more than a plan. I have evidence lawyers and federal investigators ready to move. But Michael, this has to be your choice. I can protect you financially, even physically. But if you want to walk away clean, we do it my way. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, she never loved me at all. No son, but that's her loss, not yours. Michael stood newfound determination in his eyes. Then let's give her the wedding she deserves. The one where everyone learns exactly who Madison Whitmore really is. Harold raised his glass. To truth. To justice, Michael added. To family, I finished. We drank, then spent the rest of the night planning. By the time we left, Michael knew about the trust fund, the evidence, the investigators standing by. He knew his credit was already being repaired, his accounts protected. Most importantly, he knew he wasn't alone. Never had been, never would be. Derek had meant to destroy my son's world. Instead, he'd given us the final piece we needed. Madison's plan confirmed by her co-conspirator. Her mention of Morelli establishing threat. Everything admissible, everything recorded. The wedding was in 5 days. Madison thought she was marching toward victory. She was actually walking into a trap 30 years in the making. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and bright, one of those perfect California days that made people believe in fresh starts. I stood before my bathroom mirror, carefully shaving around the scars that had defined half my life. Today, they didn't bother me. Today, they were war paint. My phone buzzed. Charlie Thompson, Rodriguez and team in position. Subject's movements tracked, no suspicious activity. Good. My old military buddy had assembled discreet security for the wedding. If Madison had actually hired Morelli for violence, they'd shut it down before anyone noticed. Another text, this one, from Harold. Eleanor's with Madison. Playing perfect mother. Madison suspects nothing. The plan was simple in concept, devastating in execution. Let Madison reach the altar. Let her believe she'd won. Then systematically destroy every lie she'd built. I dressed in my new suit, the first expensive one I'd owned in 30 years. Dark blue, perfectly tailored to minimize attention to my scars, while projecting quiet authority. In my inner pocket, a flash drive containing every piece of evidence. Financial records, photos, recordings, Derek's drunken confession. Michael called as I was leaving. Dad, you sure about this? Are you? I asked. It's not too late to simply cancel. No. His voice grew firm. She humiliated you, stole from me, planned to destroy us both. She needs to face consequences. Then I'll see you at the church. The Whitmore Country Club had been transformed into Madison's fairy tale. 10,000 white roses, crystal everywhere, ice sculptures that probably cost more than most people's cars. 300 guests who represented the cream of California society. I was assigned to the back row, of course, Madison's final insult, but I didn't mind. Better view of the exits from there. The wedding coordinator, a sharp woman named Patricia, intercepted me at the door. Mr. Matthews, Miss Whitmore wanted me to tell you there's been a seating change. You're to sit back row, I know. Patricia frowned. Actually, she said outside. She felt your presence might be distracting. Ah, Madison was taking no chances. Probably Derek's warning had gotten back to her. Of course, I smiled. I'll watch from the garden. But Harold appeared Eleanor on his arm. Nonsense. The father of the groom sits with family. Front row Brent. Patricia looked ready to argue, but one glance at Harold's expression silenced her. The Whitmores still commanded respect here, despite their daughter's behavior. We took our seats, Eleanor patting my hand. She'd aged years in the past week, but her resolve was steel. They'd chosen justice over their daughter. Not an easy choice for any parent. The music began. Michael entered with his groomsmen looking handsome despite the dark circles under his eyes. He caught my eye, nodded slightly. The boy I'd raised was ready to become the man he needed to be. Bridesmaids floated down the aisle Madison's army in lavender. The redhead from the boutique avoided eye contact. Word had spread apparently. Then came Madison. She was radiant, I had to admit. The second dress hastily purchased when her credit miraculously fixed itself, thanks to Harold, was somehow even more spectacular than the first. She glowed with triumph, with victory, with the absolute certainty that she'd won. Her eyes found me in the front row and narrowed. But her smile never wavered. Let the scarred old man watch. In minutes, she'd be Mrs. Matthews with access to everything that name would bring. The ceremony began. The officiant, a judge Harold had recommended, spoke about love trust and the sanctity of marriage. Madison gripped Michael's hands, playing the devoted bride perfectly. If anyone here has reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, the judge intoned, "Speak now or forever, hold your peace." This was it. I stood slowly, my movement drawing every eye. Madison's smile finally cracked. "I have an objection," I said clearly. The room erupted in whispers. Madison's face cycled through emotions, rage, fear, disbelief. "You can't," she hissed. "This is my day." "Actually," I said, walking forward with measured steps, "this is a day for truth." The judge, who'd been briefed on the possibility of drama, maintained his composure. "On what grounds do you object, sir?" I reached the altar, pulled out my phone. "On the grounds of fraud, theft, and conspiracy to commit violence." "He's lying," Madison shrieked. "He's always hated me. He's trying to ruin everything because he's jealous and bitter and—" "Madison," Michael's voice cut through her rant. "Stop." She turned to him, tears on demand. "Baby, you can't believe him. He's trying to break us apart." With evidence, I connected my phone to the venue's AV system, a feature we'd tested the night before. Let's start with something simple. The screens around the room, meant to display romantic photos, instead showed bank statements. Madison's spending. The credit cards in Michael's name he never knew existed. "Explain this," Michael said quietly. "Those are wedding expenses." Madison grabbed his arm. "You said to handle everything. 20,000 at jewelry stores." I swiped to the next image. 15,000 in cash withdrawals, all on cards you opened without his knowledge. The guests were mesmerized. This was better drama than anything Hollywood produced. Now for something more interesting. The screens showed Derek and Madison at the hotel. Not the intimate photos I had some class, but clearly romantic encounters. "Your Tuesday meetings with your ex." Madison's mother stood up. "Madison Elizabeth Whitmore, is this true?" But Madison was focused on me, her mask finally slipping. "You bastard! You horrible, ugly bastard! You think you've won! You think this matters? I'll destroy you in court! I'll take everything!" With what standing? I pulled out the manila envelope. "This is a restraining order, filed yesterday, based on your conspiracy with Vincent Morelli to cause me physical harm." "That's a lie." "Derek told us everything." Michael spoke up, now finding his strength. "At my bachelor party. How you planned to marry me, destroy my credit claim abuse, and divorce me within a year. Derek's drunk ramblings mean nothing. But I was already playing the recording." Derek's voice filled the room, laying out Madison's entire plan. Several guests stood to leave. but morbid curiosity kept most planted. Madison turned on her parents. "You're going to let him do this, your own daughter?" Harold stood dignity intact despite his pain. "You blackmailed us, Madison. Threatened us with fake tax documents. Stole from the man who loved you. Planned violence against Brent. You're not our daughter anymore." "I am your daughter," Madison screamed. "I'm your princess. You gave me everything." "That was our mistake," Eleanor said quietly. "We gave you everything except character." Madison lunged at me, then nails aimed at my already scarred face. But Rodriguez's team was ready. 2 discreet security guards materialized, restraining her gently but firmly. Right on cue, Detective Sarah Chen entered with 2 uniformed officers. No relation to Derek, just beautiful cosmic justice in the name. "Madison Whitmore, you're under arrest for credit fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit assault." "No." Madison struggled against the guards. "This isn't happening. Michael, tell them you love me." Michael looked at her with something almost like pity. "I did love you, or who I thought you were. But that person never existed, did she?" As the officers led Madison away, still screaming about lawsuits and revenge, I turned to the stunned guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. The reception is still paid for. Please enjoy the champagne and food. Consider it a celebration of truth over deception." People actually applauded. Not everyone, but enough. Michael came to stand beside me, Jennifer at his side. She'd been waiting in the wings, his friend who'd helped gather evidence, who'd loved him without conditions or schemes. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For being exactly the father I needed, scars and all." I hugged my son, not caring who watched. Around us, guests mingled in shocked clusters, processing what they'd witnessed. Harold and Eleanor stood apart, grief and relief warring on their faces. "Mr. Matthews," Jennifer approached tentatively. "I know this is awkward timing, but would you dance with me at the reception? I never had a father to dance with at events like this." I looked at this young woman who'd stood by my son, who'd helped expose Madison not for reward, but because it was right. I'd be honored. The reception became something unexpected. A celebration not of marriage, but of narrow escape, of family bonds tested and proven, of truth winning over carefully crafted lies. I danced with Jennifer while Michael danced with Eleanor. Harold gave an impromptu speech about the man who'd saved his company decades ago, finally naming me publicly. The story spread through the crowd like wildfire. Madison's carefully curated guest list, meant to showcase her social climbing, instead became witnesses to her downfall. By evening's end, her reputation was destroyed more thoroughly than any court case could manage. As the sun set over the country club, I stood on the same balcony where Madison had tried to auction off my dignity. Michael joined me, loosened tie and genuine smile making him look younger than he had in months. "You know what the ironic part is," he said. "What's that?" "If she'd just been herself, if she'd been honest, I probably would have loved her anyway. Flaws and all." "But then she wouldn't have been Madison," I pointed out. "The real tragedy is that she never learned the only things worth having are the things you earn honestly." We watched the last guests leave Madison's dream wedding, becoming a cautionary tale they'd tell for years. Somewhere she was being processed, her designer dress traded for jail clothes, her schemes unraveled, her future uncertain. I felt no satisfaction in her destruction, only relief that my son was safe. "Ready to go home?" I asked Michael. He smiled. "Yeah, Dad, let's go home." We walked out together, leaving the country club and all its pretensions behind. Tomorrow, Michael would start rebuilding his life. The trust fund would help, but more importantly, he'd learn to see people clearly, to value character over charm. As for me, I'd spent 30 years hiding from the world, afraid my scars made me less than human. It took Madison's cruelty to remind me that scars were just proof of survival. And survival, I'd learned, looked different on everyone. Some people survived by hiding, others by fighting. And sometimes, if you were very patient and very careful, You survived by letting the cruel destroy themselves with their own weapons. Justice served, family preserved, truth revealed. Not bad for a scarred old man from the back row. 6 months after the wedding, that wasn't. I stood in my apartment looking at an invitation. Gold-embossed lettering on cream cardstock, nothing like the ostentatious displays Madison had favored. Jennifer Marie Collins and Michael David Matthews request the honor of your presence. A real wedding this time. Small, genuine, limited to the 100 people who actually mattered in their lives. The venue was a state park overlooking the ocean, the same place I'd taken Michael camping as a boy. My phone rang, Harold Whitmore. "Brent, did you see the news?" I flipped on the television. Madison's face filled the screen, but not the polished version from her Instagram days. This Madison wore orange, her hair pulled back severely, no makeup, to mask the bitterness that had always lived beneath her beauty. "Ain't guilty on all counts," the reporter was saying. Madison Whitmore faces up to 15 years for identity theft, credit fraud, and conspiracy charges. This concludes one of the most sensational trials in recent California history. "How do you feel?" Harold asked. "Like justice was served." I muted the television. "How's Eleanor?" "Better. The therapy helps. Accepting that we enabled Madison's behavior by never saying no. It's been hard, but necessary." We'd all been in therapy, actually. Michael processing the betrayal. Me finally dealing with 30 years of isolation. Even Jennifer learning to trust that not every relationship was built on lies. "We wanted to ask you something," Harold continued, "about the company shares. You still own 40% of Whitmore Industries." "I'm aware. We'd like to buy them back. Not because we don't want you as a partner, but because Eleanor and I are restructuring everything, creating a charitable foundation. We want to do something meaningful with what we've built." I smiled. "Keep the shares. Use the dividends for your foundation. Consider it an investment in redemption." Harold's voice grew thick. "After everything Madison did to you," "Madison made her choices. You're making different ones. That's all any of us can do." After we hung up, I returned to my bedroom where boxes sat half-packed. The apartment that had sheltered me for 20 years was about to become someone else's haven. Michael had convinced me to buy a house closer to him, and Jennifer nothing fancy, just a place with a garden and room for grandchildren someday. Change, it turned out, was possible at any age. The doorbell rang. I found Jennifer standing there with a garment bag. "Your new suit arrived. Want to try it on?" The suit was midnight blue, expertly tailored. When I emerged from the bedroom, Jennifer clapped her hands. "You look distinguished, handsome. The scars make you look like someone who's survived things. That's attractive to people who value strength over surface." She was right. In the months since Madison's arrest, I'd started dating for the first time in decades. Helen, a widow I'd met at grief counseling. We took things slow, 2 people learning to live again after loss. Michael arrived as Jennifer was adjusting my tie. He carried a manila folder expression, serious. "Dad, I need to tell you something. About the money, the trust fund." My stomach clenched. Had he decided he didn't want it? That it felt tainted. "Jennifer and I have been talking. We want to use half of it to start a foundation. For burn victims and their families. Cover medical costs, therapy, things insurance won't touch." I sat down heavily. "Michael, we're calling it the Sarah Matthews Foundation, after Mom." The tears came then, 30 years of them. Michael and Jennifer flanked me, holding on while I let grief and joy wash through in equal measure. "She would have been so proud of you," I managed finally. "Of both of us," Michael corrected. "You raised me alone, Dad. Worked 2 jobs. Never complained. Never made me feel like a burden. And when Madison tried to destroy us, you fought back with wisdom instead of anger. That's the kind of man I want to be." We spent the afternoon planning the foundation. Jennifer had already researched similar organizations, identified gaps in services. Michael had spreadsheets, projections, a business plan that would have impressed any venture capitalist. They were taking pain and transforming it into purpose. Exactly what I'd tried to do all these years, but better. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. I stood as Michael's best man, watching him marry a woman who loved him for exactly who he was. Jennifer's eyes never left his face during the vows, her love uncomplicated by schemes or greed. Harold gave a reading about redemption. Eleanor sang her voice clear and beautiful, despite tears. Even Derek Chen's father attended, having cut ties with his son after learning about the conspiracy. He apologized to Michael personally, a gesture that took courage. During the father-daughter dance, Jennifer pulled me onto the floor. "I meant what I said before. You're the father I wish I'd had." "Careful," I warned. "I might start thinking of you as the daughter I never had." "Too late, you already do." She was right. The heart, I'd learned, had infinite capacity for growing new connections. Later, as the reception wound down, I found myself at a table with Helen watching the young people dance. She'd worn purple, my favorite color, and her hand rested comfortably in mine. "They look happy," she observed. "They are happy. Real happiness, not the performed kind. Speaking of which," Helen squeezed my hand, "I've been thinking about your invitation to travel. See the places you and Sarah talked about visiting. And I'd like that. Living is better than just surviving." Rodriguez approached our table, still looking like he could take down a small army despite his gray hair. "Great party, Matthews. No security threats unless you count your dancing." I laughed. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have been able to joke about anything. Now life felt full of possibility again. "Mr. Matthews." A young woman approached hesitantly. "I'm Rebecca Sullivan from Channel 7 News. I wondered if you'd comment on Madison Whitmore's sentencing." The old me would have declined, hidden, avoided the spotlight. But that man had been buried with his isolation. Madison Whitmore was a troubled young woman who mistook cruelty for cleverness and greed for ambition. I hope she uses her time in prison to discover who she really is beneath all that anger. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption, even those who've hurt us deeply. Rebecca blinked, clearly expecting bitterness. "That's very generous considering what she did. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. I've got better things to do with my time. Like building a life, like loving my family, like helping other burn survivors find hope." The reporter thanked me and moved on. Helen smiled. "You've become quite the philosopher. I've had good teachers." As the evening ended, I stood to give a toast. The crowd quieted, all eyes on the scarred man who'd once hidden in back rows. They say the best revenge is living well. I disagree. The best revenge is living authentically. Madison Whitmore tried to shame me for my scars, mock me for my simplicity, destroy my son for her greed. She saw surfaces and missed souls. I raised my glass to Michael and Jennifer. These two see clearly. They love honestly. They give generously. In trying to tear our family apart, Madison actually brought us closer together. She revealed not our weaknesses, but our strength. To Michael and Jennifer, to love that builds instead of takes, to families that stand together, and to the beautiful truth that our scars, visible or hidden, are simply proof that we've lived, loved, and survived. The applause was warm and genuine. Michael wiped his eyes. Jennifer blew me a kiss. And somewhere in a California prison, Madison Whitmore was learning that actions have consequences, that cruelty creates its own cage. I'd started this journey as a hidden man, afraid that my scars made me less than human. I'd ended it surrounded by love-building legacies, traveling toward new horizons. The fire had taken my face, my wife, my old life. But from those ashes, I'd built something Madison never understood, a life of meaning, connection, purpose. She'd wanted to humiliate me. Instead, she'd liberated me. And that I thought as I danced with Helen under the stars was the most beautiful justice of all. Dear friends, we've reached the end of our story. I share this tale as someone who learned that true strength isn't about wealth or appearance, but about standing up for those we love and facing cruelty with wisdom instead of hatred. If you've ever been mocked for your appearance, targeted for your perceived weakness, or watched someone you love fall prey to manipulation, I hope this story reminds you that patience and truth are the most powerful weapons we possess. What would you have done in my position? Would you have revealed Madison's schemes earlier or waited, as I did? Have you ever had to protect someone who didn't yet see the danger they were in? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or gave you hope, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to hear more stories about justice, redemption, and the triumph of character over cruelty. Share it with someone who needs reminding that their scars, whatever form they take, are badges of honor, not shame. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May you always see past surfaces to souls, and may those who mistake kindness for weakness learn, as Madison did, that the gentle often carry the sharpest swords. Until next time, remember we are all more than what others see. Sometimes it just takes the right moment to reveal our true selves.